Let's talk about the day in the life of a military pilot, whether they are CONUS or OCONUS. So, whether you are basically in the United States or whether you are outside of the United States, is there much of a difference?
The biggest difference is stateside, you have a lot of the standard baggage you brought with you, the history that you have. So, family, friends, the hobbies you enjoy to do, all those kind of things that are also pulling your time for the spare time, the off time that you have. When you're overseas, that desire exists, but the specifics of what that is are harder to come by, at least initially. So the folks who get to go overseas a lot of times rely upon each other a lot more. So they focus on doing things as a group, a squadron. The people that they're working with every day, they get a chance to do a lot more of that exploring in the off time with them. Whereas when you're stateside, Christmas comes up and everybody splits and they go visit family, or birthday comes up and things, spring break, you got summer vacation, all those kind of things are not necessarily bad. They give you the separation and you still come back together as a squadron. But it's different when you're downrange. It's a lot more intense because you're not plugged into the local social scene. You go learn the local social scene with the folks that you are there with. But the day to day job is still kind of similar. It's easily a 12 to 14-hour day every day that you're in a combat coded squadron. Part of the reason mid-career that people get the career broadening experiences is sometimes the Air Force uses that as a chance for them to reconnect with their family. They'll send them to school for a year or two where they've got just kind of a normal, almost college life, where they get some time to go hang out with their family, play a little golf, kind of relax and take a break from what's been a really hard 8 to 10 years of waking up first thing in the morning, you go to work and you work until the sun is definitely probably set. You get the weekends, you get federal holidays and things like that off sometimes. If you're deployed, you're working 6 or 7 days a week with maybe a day off to do laundry kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been one, every time I deployed, it was I knew I had to do something to disconnect, if you will, from life back at home. I knew that there was always that aspect of my life was always going to be there. I mean, back then I didn't have kids, right? I only had, back then a fiance. So things were a little bit simpler. Obviously, there are people who deploy with kids and already formed families, and that can be a lot harder. But I had to learn real quickly how to segment my thoughts, how to segment and prioritize what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I had to effectively create a wall, if you will, in my head where, yes, I had things going on at home, but there was a clear wall in order for me to remain focused at my mission and what I had to do, because at the end of the day, that's life and death. Would you say that that was similar to what you went through when you deployed?
My downrange experience, there was one of them that was fairly high threat. A lot of them tended to be command and control stuff inside the wire, where the security on the outside, like we didn't go outside the green zones. Like I didn't go on any of the black routes or anything like that in Iraq or anything.
Yeah.
Few of the guys did because they had to go between the airport and down to the embassy. We lose a lot more people in training in the flying of airplanes typically than we lose downrange. Every day we go to fly, it's life or death. You can take off, go into the weather. There was one day we took off here with a 4 ship of F-15s, and we went into the weather in fingertip, which is 3 feet from the other airplanes, basically. All four of us climbed up to 50,000 feet and couldn't find clean air to go fight. So
Yeah.
then all four of us had to descend back down before lining up for an instrument approach, splitting up and landing. That whole flight, that whole hour and a half flight, the only thing you could see is the person, the airplane right next to you that you're focusing on flying with, and hoping that the person to your left and the person to your right, that they're going to do their job equally well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of is like that every day you go fly. You can easily mess up, and it's just a couple of seconds of being off your game or distracted by something, and it can be fatal. And some
Yeah.
of this, sometimes it's not even things under your control.
I
You
mean,
hit some birds on shortly after takeoff or coming into land, especially if you're in a single engine kind of thing like an F-16 or an F-35. The engine's gone. You're getting out of the airplane probably. Open up those barriers where you are able to focus on what you do for your job and separating out, compartmentalizing all of the other stuff that goes on outside of that with family, with your career, with even the person who cuts you off in traffic coming into work that morning is very important. But also thinking to the higher level of that, it's easy to start compartmentalizing everything into just little bins that never talk to each other. And the stress builds up. Resiliency, the ability to not just trust your teammates, your wingmen, the people you are working with to not mess up and to do their job well because they're trusting on you to do the same when you're flying or on the ground or whatever. You got to be able to trust them when it's time to talk about some stuff that needs to get talked about. We have a terrible tendency as military folks to bottle everything up inside until the cork pops and then it gets bad. I mean, we lose, what is it? The last stats I'd heard was 22 vets a day to suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
slightly dated stat, but it's hard. When I was in Iraq, there was a sergeant major there who, at that point in time, we had been doing OIF for 6.5 years, and he had been downrange for 5 of those years because every
Yeah.
time he went home, he didn't know how to reintegrate. It's a big change. It's a change
Absolutely.
for the family, the kids, the wife, the husband, mom and dad, whatever family friend relationships you have back home. You've been gone for 3, 6, 9 months, a year, 15 months, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're back and your purpose has changed. You're disrupting their standard flow of things. And it's
Absolutely.
very, very difficult to keep that compartmentalization in balance. And the only way I was able to do it is there were people in my peer group that were going together. It was cooperate to graduate.
Yep.
We were able to share things. We were able to go to what they now call the Heritage Room, basically, the bar and tell stories, go play golf. Maybe it's a rainy day. We go have lunch as a squadron to do the most important thing we do, which is develop the relationships with the squadron mates, the teammates, the people that we're working with every day. It's way more important than the actual capability that you have. Because if you can't trust them to be there for you, or if you think they're going to stab you in the back just because you got something you're dealing with, it's destructive.
This stuff happens every day when we go into the airplane, right? You get in the airplane, and what you want to do is you don't want to be thinking about, anything other than the airplane, thinking about always being ahead of it, right? And the last thing you want to be doing is flying if you have a family problem, flying if you have a marital problem, flying if your kids are sick, if your head is not in the right place. The airplane, remember, the airplane's still going at, 700 to 800 miles an hour, and you gotta be ahead of it, and that's how human factors comes into play. So we can definitely take a piece of what we learned from being overseas and bring that into this job. And I think that was one of, at least for me, one of the biggest lessons that I took from the military was the ability to learn how to compartmentalize and prioritize and understand how to effectively return back to normal, if you know what that means. And a lot of it has to do with what you said, with camaraderie with your peers, being able to grab that extended arm and ask for help. And that goes across the board, whether you're a fighter pilot, whether you're a green beret, whether you're a PJ, whether you're just you're an airline pilot going from a hard flight with a captain you didn't enjoy so much, with a micromanager, and going to another flight with a good captain.
There's a saying in aviation, right? There are no old, bold pilots. You can be an old pilot or you can be a bold pilot, but you can't do both.
Yeah.
And that really comes down to the experience and not just your experience. Like I said, we fly two people, maybe three, maybe four, maybe in the 7.6, you got a whole bunch of jump suiters there with you watching everything you're doing, right? Even in the military, on the fighter side of things, like you're never alone. There's a team on the ground, the SOF. You got the squadron you can call. You got ATC. You've got your wingman or your flight lead or the rest of the formation that's there with you to help recover the airplane or to help solve the problems that you have going forward. And if you're so proud that you can't understand that the only day you quit learning is the day that you're dead, then you're going to fail to learn something that day, which adds just a little bit of something to that toolkit that you're carrying with you that down the road can pay off. But there are some guys that are really hardcore about the fact that they've got it figured out, and that's sometimes a scary place to be. And not letting yourself get to that place where you're so angry or jaded or you're distracted and not being honest with what's going on with the people you're flying with that day. And sometimes you just got to say no, even if there's a tail to be paid for that, right? You got to get a doctor's note as a 50-year-old to say, hey, I had to go to the doctor, mom, but
Yeah.
you got to
Right.
do it, right? Or you
Right.
go, I'm too tired to fly.
Yeah.
And it's even harder when you got to listen to the other person that's saying that without saying it. And
Peer pressure.
that peer pressure to get the job done, but the actual job you got to do is be able to listen to that other person. And that's really hard to do,
Yeah.
especially when things are tough or you're tired or you're thinking about getting home or all the other things you have to do. It can be a really hard place for people to get to.